Hey, Red Fire and all the other guys on Homebrew Talk. I told you I'd do this video on strings right quick. I'm getting ready to go for a bike ride. I thought I'd do it really quick. Uh, not gonna actually change my strings, but just kind of give you a few little tips that I wish somebody would have told me. I kind of had to learn the hard way. I don't know how well you can see this. I'm not the best cameraman. These strings are pretty much, I should really be changing them. You can see there's a little discoloration where my fingers touch down here versus like here where they don't really touch that much, and they kind of have an oily feel, especially on these wound strings. And really these are the ones that really wear out. These strings, they usually break before they just sound terrible in my opinion. But I don't ever change just one string. If one breaks, I recommend just changing them all, because strings are really cheap, and you end up with a set of 4 or 5 laying around. Which, you know, some of the guys that play all the time, they're playing on gigs every weekend, they may buy some extra E and G strings or something like that. I mean, you can do that if you want, but it's just cheaper just to buy a bunch of strings. This is what I usually buy, but I'm not really that partial to any particular brand. But these are the custom lights versus the regular lights, and I like them a lot better, and they sound better. And I usually buy, like, this is a 3-pack. I usually buy 3 or 12 or something, because it's a little bit cheaper. The main thing to note here is these are regular phosphor bronze, just regular, what I would call conventional strings. You can get coated strings. Coated strings, they last a lot longer, and the trade-off is, and they don't really come right out and tell you this, but if you look at the descriptions, they'll usually say something like, "Finally, a coated string that sounds amazing." Well, I've played with coated strings quite a bit, and they just don't sound as good to me. They do last longer, but they also cost more. So, and I haven't bought coated strings in years, but when I did buy them last time, I think they were about $9 or $10 a set. So you could just almost buy 2 regular sets of strings for the cost of one coated set. And the only thing that you're going to lose is the time to change strings. And after you do this a few times, you'll get really fast at it. It's not difficult. It really only takes just a few minutes. I mean, once you get good at it. I watched a musician. I watched the lead singer of Turnpike Troubadours change a string in a song, and he sang the entire time, and he changed the string. And I know he's a professional, but if you can do it while you sing a song, it's humanly possible to do it. It's not difficult. I mean, it's something that all guitar players, you pick it up and you learn it, and it's really simple. But I recommend getting a string winder, and I've had this one a long time, and it looks like a Planet Waves brand, but I don't think it really matters what brand. But this one is a string winder, and you can see I'm sorry, I've only got one hand here, but that part spins. You can also tell that doubles as a peg puller. I can slip it up under a peg that's giving me a little trouble to get it out, and then here on the end, that's a string clipper or cutter that you can use to cut the excess off when you get done putting your strings on. So it's a great tool to have. Really not just so much for the winding, because you can do that with your hands, but for the fact that you can cut strings, and it's also a peg puller. Those are the 2 things that I would say is really the best part about it. But when you go to change your strings, I recommend just go ahead and take them all off. Okay, take them all off up here. Some people cut them, but just put your string winder on there and just go ahead and unwind them. and take them out, and then come down here and get them out of the pegs. Now, you're going to have them that get stuck, and like I said, that tool's got a peg puller, and that's great, but this is my first little tip that I wish somebody would have told me. You can take the string and you can actually push it back into the body of the guitar, and usually that peg will come right out. But if you keep trying to prise and prise and prise on it, you'll break it. You can even break your saddle. You can break your peg puller, or you could hurt the body of your guitar, or put a crack in it, or a ding or something like that. So always, if it's not coming, before you go to a tool, try to force it back down into the body of the guitar, and usually that peg will just come right out with your fingers if you do that. Now, these really thin strings, you can't hardly do that. You can't really push them back down, but they're not really the ones that usually get stuck. It's usually like the ones that have D and G, you know, they have a lot of tension and they're a little bit bigger. They usually get stuck, and like I said, just grab it, try to force it back down in there, and usually that peg will come loose. If it doesn't, you know, put the peg puller and pry just a little. You won't have too many. I mean, if you went months and months and months without changing your strings, then yeah, you may have a stubborn one. But generally speaking, you know, if you change your strings on a fairly regular basis, you're only going to have 1 in 100 that does that to you. So it's not too big of a problem. But it is a good idea to have extra pegs around, because they do break and they get lost. And here comes my second big tip that I wish somebody would have told me. You can put your thumb over these when you're down here winding your strings. When you get them put on, you can put your thumb over these pegs and kind of try to keep them from popping out until they get some tension on them. Otherwise, it's going to, you know, one can pop out and go flying across the room, and you're going to be looking for it for 30 minutes. That's frustrating if you're about to play for somebody or something like that. But to avoid that, for the most part, what you can do is when you get your string in there, grab it, not here in the middle, but the excess on what's going to be hanging out down here before you even put it around your machine heads. Grab it and pull it forcefully, jerk it like pop. You should hear a pop when you do it. And what that'll do is that'll go ahead and seat that peg and pull the excess up through and put some sideways, some cross tension on it where it won't want to pop out. So do that on every one of them, and I recommend just go through here, and when you open up your new strings, and put them in the pegs first and get them all in the pegs. That way you make sure they're in the right order and that you've all got them seated in there fairly well. You'll still kind of want to put your hand over it a little bit when you're tightening them, but if you do that trick I just told you, they're not going to pop out on you. So, but you can have them break, and you can see this one's, it's not an original Gibson. It's been broken or lost and probably got broke. So it's, like I said, good to have an extra one. You can use a stick if you're playing with some people or something. You just have to play and you don't have an extra guitar. You can get a stick and whittle it down and shove it in there, and that'll get you through for a little while. Next thing, when you get your strings off, get some guitar polish. This is a good time to do it. I mean, you can do this, you know, it doesn't matter if your strings are on or not, but I do it whenever I change my strings just so I remember. So this is a Dunlop, it's like lemon scented, which I don't really care for that, but just spray your guitar down. Don't use furniture polish or anything. I've heard a lot of war stories about finishes that have been damaged from that kind of stuff. Spray it down all over the guitar. Just, you know, spray your tuners down and everything. Don't get it on the fretboard. And then when you got your strings off, go ahead and don't oil your fretboard unless you have your strings off, because you don't want to get this stuff on your strings. It'll ruin them. And then go ahead and get a paper towel and just scrub in between each little fret, and just get all the grease and oil and get that oil worked in there. You can see fretboards dry out really easy, and you can probably see on mine where it's got fret wire hanging over the edges and little pieces of finish have chipped off the sides because it's really humid here in Arkansas, but it stays in the air conditioner and gets dry. You can buy a little moisturizer thing for a few bucks. I recommend getting one of those. They'll save you from having cracks and problems with your neck and stuff. So that's something to think about. But back to the strings. My next good tip, and this is really the big one. When you put your strings on, obviously you got to start with these bottom ones and work your way up. You can't start with the top one, because then you won't have room to put the strings on. And make sure that they're all wound the same way, so they go counterclockwise to tighten them. If you wind one backward by accident, it's going to touch one of these other strings and kill the sound. It's going to make it hard to tune. You can break a string tuning it, or if you hand it to somebody and they don't notice it, they can wind it the wrong way and break it. So make sure they're all going the same way, which turn that counterclockwise to tighten it. But the trick I was going to tell you is, a lot of people they'll run the string up through here and they'll pull it really tight, and then they'll try to tighten it. Don't do that. You want quite a bit of slack down here. You want to be able to put your fist under it at least, and what that's going to do is that's going to allow you to get more wraps on it, and it's going to want to stay in tune better if you do that. So that's really important. The next thing is, when you pull the string through here and you got plenty of slack here, and you've got this excess, and I hope you can understand what I'm talking about. When you wind it the first time, you want it to go under here, under this, and then the next time you wind the second wrap, you want it to go over the top. And what that'll do is it'll kind of tie a little knot, and it's not going to want to slip and pop on you, and it's not going to want to come out of tune as easily if you do that. If you just wind it all the same way, it can slip and pop really for the entire life of that string. It's always going to slip and pop, and you're going to be wondering why. Another thing, strings, when you're tuning them, and not just with a new set of strings, but any set. I've got an inexpensive guitar. Well, actually, I'll just call this one a cheap one. Really bad about the strings getting hung up in the nut, and this part of the guitar, it's called the nut. And right in there, the strings can get hung up, and if you're tuning it and you don't hear the pitch going up, it's probably hung up in the nut, and it's going to break if you keep doing it. I mean, it doesn't take much, because you're tightening it up here, and this is really short. There's not much string from one of the tuners down here, and so just be wary of that. You can take a string and run it in through there to remove any burrs or anything. You don't want to actually take any plastic off, but that can help alleviate that. So camera's about to run out of battery, so I'm gonna go ahead and cut this one. I hope this helped, but if you have any more questions, just let me know.